Hello there. Alright. It looks like we're just going to start today. Not gonna bother waiting around for anyone. I'm just going to begin. Hopefully it's coherent what I'm about to teach here. So I spent a little bit of time searching around the web, making sense of things and trying to digest the info. But our subject for today is going to be 4-note chords. So we've been talking about triads for quite a while, right? And 3-note chords and scale and building 3-note chords from notes in a scale. But now we're going to talk about 4-note chords, and this will give us the opportunity to talk about some functions that chords can have, and maybe give us a better understanding of chord progressions. And if we know the functions of some chords, then namely these functions would be leading to other chords, and why they do, and then it shouldn't be too hard to go ahead and build a chord progression of based on these these rules. So let me finish getting my screen set up here, and we will go ahead and begin talking about these things. Okay, here we go. Gonna go ahead and into the studio. I'm gonna open up a project I was working on on Wednesday, with the chord progression templates. We're going to go ahead and improve on that. So let's quickly bop in here. Okay. I can pull up my screen now. All right. Hello, hello, hello. Let us begin. I'm going to first start off by just going to a new spot. Making sure my volume is not going to be too loud here, at least for me. Okay, so we have a 1, 4, 5, 4. Let's go ahead and make a clip that just has all the triads on C, in C major. It's the same as yesterday. We have a project that's in C major at 120. Let's open up our instrument, and let's do a triad for every note in the scale. So you can probably get a better view here. Again, this part's a little slower because it's switching over to the left side of the keyboard, so this might be something you have to get used to if you're trying to play triads for yourself with Soundtrap. So check it out. This is kind of the key pattern here. Trying to hold it in the same spot. And then when you get to ACE, you have to go up to the Q. This would be easier if I wasn't holding it up with my other hand. But you get the idea. Like, see, it goes from N, M, comma, period, up to Q here. So when you're trying this out, just be aware of that if you're trying to play down here in the slower octave. And if you are going up the keys, it's something you're going to have to deal with. Let me make sure that my MIDI device is plugged in. Perhaps I can use my keyboard to play, and it'll be a little easier to... Aha! So now I'm using my MIDI keyboard, so I'll have to deal with that. So now just go ahead and look down here at the bottom. Okay. Let me just bring up my screen here. Okay. I'm going to make this one full screen too. Okay, awesome. So, just a little sketch of what I'd like to talk about today. Mainly this, we're going to focus on our 4-note chords, but first we're going to just go back over our triads in C. So, we have our tonic. So, we have C, E, G. And before I continue, let me just define some stuff. So ignore all that, ignore all of that, ignore all this text down here. Just focus on structure versus function. So we're going to completely just disregard, well, we don't want to completely disregard function, but the functions of triads, what I'm going to say, the functions of triads are very limited as opposed to the functions of 4-note chords, because you have more notes, and I'll get into why. But just know that functions are less important. We're worrying more about how we build the chords themselves. So, like, what intervals are they made up of? So for C, E, G, it's going to be made up. It's going to be made up of a major third. So 4 semitones. That's the shorthand version for semitones. And then we have, on top of that, a minor third. So this is the structure right here. So that's the structure. And then down here, I have some names of the chords. I'll get into kind of a little bit on what these mean, but the most important kind of function we can have for a chord is this one right here, the tonic. Let me maybe even highlight it in multiple colors, or I'll even just do, like, what would be a good color to represent this? Let's say a nice blue, light blue. So this is what we would call our tonic key, or our tonic chord. And tonic essentially means the 1 chord. All right, below it I have some other names. What some people would call these chords, they would just call them based on a chord based on its scale degree, like the 1 chord or the 2 chord or 3 chord. But it is called tonic because that is the chord that is on the first scale degree. So you can see here beneath this, I have kind of this little home icon, little home drawing to tell us that the 1 chord is the home chord. So basically, when you're making a chord progression, the tonic is the start of your chord progression and also the end of your chord progression. Everything wants to lead back to the tonic, and the tonic can go anywhere. And we'll explore this concept more once we start actually putting notes down. How else could I describe the tonic? So it is the same. Another thing about the tonic is the tonic chord is the same chord as the scale. So the C major scale. This is in C major, by the way. Triads in C major. It's the chord that's based on 1. So it's the C major. It's easy to tell. It basically, when you have the scale, you automatically right away you know that the tonic chord is the C chord. C major, the tonic is the C major chord. And additionally, whatever quality of the scale you're using, so if you're using a C major scale, that tonic chord is going to be the same quality as the scale. So if you were using a C minor scale, your first tonic chord, your home chord, would be C, E flat, G. So if you were in, let me just draw this out. If you were in C minor, it would be C, E flat, G. All right, and that would be your tonic. Just by the structure alone, just by the scale alone, right? And of course, because the notes are different, the structure is different. It's a minor third, major third. It's opposite, right? Minor third, major third. Those who have been watching consistently, sure, you have seen this enough times. So it's easy to determine if you have the notes. You can easily tell the interval between them. You could just look and see, all right, we have an E flat here, we have a G here. You go to your keyboard, you go to your Midi keyboard or your computer keyboard or your Soundtrap keyboard, and you just count 2. So 1, 2, 3, 4. That tells it's a major third. And so if we're trying to figure out the intervals for the whole chord, for the whole C minor chord, 1, 2, 3, and then so that is minor third, then 1, 2, 3. Let me stop playing with my my mouse. So 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's a minor third, major third, a minor chord, therefore. Okay. So that is the structure of the tonic chord. Ignoring the function, right? We don't know. We know that the function of the tonic chord, right, is for it to be the home key and to lead somewhere else. We don't know exactly how quite yet. So let's know that, right? We don't know how the tonic leads to other chords, because the tonic doesn't lead to other chords. The other chords eventually lead to the tonic. That's function stuff. We're worrying about structure right now, and I want to make sure that we make a distinction between the two, because it'll make explaining chords, I think, a little easier if I can work within either of those two contexts. Like, this is structure, this is function. Because structure can be independent of key, right? Function tends to be within a key, and let's go on. Let's look at the, and also don't worry about these other names. We have supertonic, mediant, subdominant, dominant. I'll go over a little bit what they mean, but they're not in everyday, let's say everyday music production, they're not going to really come up. Like, you're not going to be thinking, oh, the supertonic of the mediant, that's going to lead to the dominant, but should I put a submediant before that? Yeah, this is why I listed these kind of more, how can I want to use the word colloquial, like simpler to understand terms than these historic, weird-sounding words that have a lot of meaning to them, but kind of just convolute. We just want to get the general idea of them, really. But it's interesting to know what they are. Like, I did go to college for this stuff, so I do kind of find it interesting. I'm just not sure how much y'all would. And which is why, feedback is nice. I like, if say there are viewers, this is to the future viewer that may or may not decide to come on stream and be a part of the fun, and fun in my definition of fun. Oh my gosh. Please give feedback. Tell me. For those watching afterwards, tell me in the comments. Give me like a specific point in the video, like, hey, I didn't understand this, and if you're a BVMP student, I could, or if you're anyone for that matter, I could help in the comments. But if you're a BVMP student, I could have some sort of one-on-one to kind of catch you up in a sense, and sort of just like talk to you, or talk to one person, because I find it personally easier to explain something when I'm getting the confirmation. Anyway, let's assume that everyone's just shaking their head and going, uh-huh, yeah, I understand, even if they aren't like they are, you know, like people normally do in public school. Anyways, so let's just all shake our head and nod and pretend we understand for now. So moving on, so we were talking more about, like, in detail, the tonic chord. And above that we have the supertonic. This means nothing more than the supertonic is one note above the tonic. Actually it's one whole step above the tonic. That's kind of what it means. So supertonic, I will give myself a little room here. Supertonic, one whole step or two semitones above tonic. So yeah, that's what that means. The mediant. The mediant's going to make more sense when I explain dominant, so we'll skip over mediant for now. The mediant is the 3 chord. But you might know from, yeah, I'll get to it. Subdominant. Oh, this is on the 4th. Again, this will make more sense when I explain dominant, because we need to know what dominant is to understand subdominant. Oops, I skipped over the actual important one. The dominant. In C, it's going to be Gbd, because structurally wise, when we're talking about just the structure of a dominant chord, well, a dominant chord in any scale is built on the 5th scale degree, and it is a major, it is actually a major 7th chord, which we're going to get to 7ths. We're going to get to 4-note chords, and because a dominant can either be, is most often a 5 with a 7th added on top, but you can also technically call a dominant, you can also have a dominant triad with just Gbd, and that will lead you back to the tonic, and we'll explain more about that function when we get there. So dominant is the 5 chord in any scale. It is a major triad, so it's a major triad at the least. You can add a 7th on top, but you're still going to have these notes in there. That's these specific notes. Obviously, we're in a scale. We're within the context of a scale. So we have Gbd representing 5, or the 5th scale degree, the 7th scale degree, and the 2nd scale degree. You could also technically say the 9th scale degree because you're above the 7th, if that makes more sense to you. But so that's in terms of scale degrees. So I'll put little hats on top. This might have been a very small detail in one of the other days, but I'm going to represent scale degrees by using hats above all of the numbers. So that sounds like this again. Our tonic, our number 1 is here. And then our 5 chord. Tonic. I'll show the keyboard so you can see what notes they are, even though you just saw them. We have a Gbd, and that goes to C, E, G. 5. And then 1. 5 to 1, or maybe 5 to 1, or even 5 to 1. It's got a very, you might notice it, you might be able to hear that it kind of leads, even though I haven't really explained what that means yet, but you might be able to tell. So in our tonic chord we have this, and then in our dominant chord we have the same notes almost, or one of the notes are the same. the top note, the G, the 5 of the chord, is the same. And then we have a B, which is very close to the C. And then we have a D, which is also very close to the C, and also very close to the E. So let me talk about this more in depth. Okay, let me go down to where I have intervals written. Aha. All right. So let's take a look here. So we have what's known as so on the left here we have the notes of a 5 chord. So you can see here we have the 5. Don't worry about the 7 for now. I've kind of skipped forward because I'm showing. Right. Just ignore this part. We're just going to look at this first box because it doesn't have the 7 in the chord. We just have the 1, 3, 5. So this is our dominant 5. Just pretend this is not here. Dominant 5. We have our G, our B, our D. And then we have the first note of our 1 chord, our tonic chord, the C. So you can see, no pun intended, that that our 5, our D, goes down. So it goes down to the C. So D to C, and that as far as melodic motion intervals, as far as that goes, we could consider that a strong resolution. As far as resolutions go, we can consider a small motion or a small interval to be strong, especially if it's going to one of the notes in the tonic, chord. So we have notes. We have the 3. So let's go through this one at a time. Well, starting at the bottom. We start at the top, but we'll look at now we're going to look at this this G. Now, how this is also strong, but how so? Because I had just said that that smaller intervals are stronger resolutions. Yet this is the strongest resolution there can be because of not because of the strength of each resolution, and it's because of the amount of resolutions you have. So you can have it's a resolution if it's going to a tonic. And by the way, this doesn't necessarily have to be a 5 to have resolutions within a chord. I'll show another chord that also resolves to the tonic shortly, after I add some extra notes to chords. But I want to talk about this just resolutions briefly. We'll get back to it. Remember, I'm just talking about the first box. So we have the G going up a 4th to the C. So you have strength in resolutions. There are a resolution has strength if it's small and leads to if it's small and it's right next to a tonic chord, if the note is right next to one of the notes in tonic. So a D to C would be strong, a B to C would be strong. Over here we have the 3. This is the E. Oops, wrong tool. This is the E in C, E, G, so the 3 of the tonic chord. And we have the 5 of the G, B, D. This is plus a 7, but don't worry about that. We have the 5, the D, leading to E. So the D not only leads to C down a second, it also leads up to the E, up a second. So it resolves 2 ways. And then you have the 5, that's we just talked about that. So the 5 leads up to 3, goes down to 1. You have the B, the 3 of the chord in. So how can I describe this using less numbers and more? So, should I say second note in chord or the third and the fifth note in the chord? Let's try maybe describing it like this then. Instead of 5 and 7, well, maybe I'll do it both ways. Ah, yes. Okay. Okay. Here, I'll make it more clear real quick. So we have notes in the chord. We'll just do down here 1, 2, 3, and then we'll do one bigger numbers with hats above them to represent the scale degrees that these are. If, in fact, that doesn't make sense either because this technically is the 5th scale degree. That's the 7th. That's the 2nd scale degree. Okay, then I'll just stick with the numbers, referring to the chord itself rather than within the context of C major. Because if I were to write 5, if I were to write them out in terms of scale degrees, it would look like this: 5, 7, 2, because you have the 5 is G in C major, and then 7 is B in C major, so on and so forth, and it makes less sense because we're trying to tell, oh, this is a 5 chord, or this is a major chord on G. That is what the 5 chord is. So then that's the first note of it, that's the second note of it, that's the third note of it. And then we have a 1 chord on C, or no, excuse me, a major chord on C, which is the tonic, which is the 1. So that's going to be our first note, that's going to be our third note, excuse me, the second note, and this is going to be, oops, I don't know how that became a little square. Second, this is not the 5th, but actually the 3rd note of the scale, and this is the scale. That's the 3rd note of the chord. This is the 4th, the 1st, the 4th, and the 3rd, and then this is the 1st, 3rd, 2nd, 3rd. I should put the numbers on the right so it's consistent. 1, 2, 3, 1. Okay. So now, let me just go through this again with the correct numbers. Also, or just the first box, really, just the first box. Sorry for jumping around a lot, by the way. That's just how I am. I apologize. We have our strong fourth up resolution here from G to C. We have our second resolution for the interval being a second, so it's a second up, a minor second up from B to C, and then a major second down from D to C. So we have some second resolutions from B to C, and then from D to C, and then we also have a 4th resolution up from G to C. So 4th resolution up from the 2nd of G major to the 1st of C major. The 2nd of the G major chord to the 1st of the C major chord is a minor second up. That is the resolution. And then same for the D down to C. I'm just trying to kind of rehash over this and reword it in the best way. So maybe if it didn't make sense the first time, because this kind of might be a lot to take in. So I'm just trying to sort of go through things carefully. On that note, let's jump up and let's try to make more sense of this 4 here, because we have a 4, and I haven't yet talked about how we can even have chords with 4 notes. I have only talked about I've talked briefly about this structure versus function, but let's talk about 4-note chords. Let's first try adding another note on top of these triads. So we're making, it would make sense to call them, because we have triads with 3 notes. And then why wouldn't we call the ones with 4 notes, the chords of 4 notes, quartets or quads? Beyond me, but I know why we call them 7th chords. Someone's calling me. A marathon. Okay, that can wait. Probably a spam. So, oh, that might be, no, never mind. It's not important. Unless they leave a voicemail, then it is important. So, 4-note chords, right? Why aren't they called quads? Why aren't they called quartets? Don't know, but they are. But I do know why they're called sevenths, because if we're looking at the scale degrees, let's look at the scale degrees of the very first one, the tonic chord, the tonic chord with a seventh. So we have, let's look at the scale degrees of it. So we have a 1, scale degree 1, scale degree 3, scale degree 5. Guess what goes here? Scale degree 7. So that is our seventh. So now this is basically a triad, a major triad, with an added seventh on top. And that is the case if we are just looking at intervals, right? We're looking at intervals. Like, let's say that we were to consider D as the first note in the scale. Like this was part of a D minor scale right here, right? This was, maybe we're in D minor now. So let me just play the notes of D minor to kind of make this more clear. Go down an octave. So that's our D minor scale, and we have our D minor triad on DFA, and then we add a seventh on top. So 1, 3, 5, 7. If we were talking about it in terms of the scale degrees of C major now, it would be a little bit more confusing. We'd have 2, 4, 6, and then actually 1 again, or 8. They mean the same thing, technically. Yeah, because a scale degree 8 is the same as scale degree 1. This is just up an octave. Okay, but right, if we were considering it as D being the first note of the scale, then C becomes the seventh of that scale. All right, it's a triad 1, 3, 5 with 7. Okay. And we'll talk about what quality. Now, you might be asking, okay, so we have a D minor with a seventh. What does that still, is that still a minor? Or we have a C major with a seventh. Is that still a major? What quality is it? Well, it's pretty simple. Here we have our quality down here in terms of Roman numerals. And there are several variations of a seventh chord, and we'll get into those. We'll just look at the purely the structure of a seventh chord and look at the different types of seventh chords. But let's see, just similarly to how we looked at how what qualities come out of making triads based on a scale, let's look and see what qualities come out of seventh chords we make using notes in a scale, using notes in a major scale. Specifically this one, a C major scale. So picking the first, the third, the fifth, and the seventh, we get a C, E, G. So a root to major third to minor third, and then the B is going to end up making a G to a B. That is 4 semitones, therefore a major third. And that is therefore going to mean that the seventh is major. because it is a major third above a major chord. So you get that capital, so you get the capital Roman letter 1, Roman number 1, indicating that that's a major chord. So we have a major 7. And when you have the MAJ written there, like let's say we were to write this out as such. Then these two would mean the same thing, right? These two would mean the same thing. So these are equivalent. And the major 7th means that major means that the chord, the triad beneath it, so this is the triad, right? And this is the 7th added on top, added as like in math, like you would, it's kind of put in the same place as you would put an exponent in math. So you have the base, which is the triad, so it's based on a triad, and then you have the exponent, the power. So like let's say 2 to the 4th power, right? This is the base, this is the exponent. It's not really a good analogy. This is just kind of how it's written. Like it doesn't have to do with the function of it at all. It's like not multiplying the notes or anything like that, but just that's kind of how you would write it, right? So then let's look at what comes out of basing a 7th chord on 2. So we have a minor triad here, DFA. I've written it in blue to indicate it's minor, green to indicate it's major. So then we have the... We're ignoring the names here. See, we've only got tonic and dominant here because we're going to focus mainly on those functions when it comes to 7th chords, because depending on where you put the 7th in any of the others, it changes the function entirely. In fact, that has to do with any of the chords in the scale, any of the chords in this diagram here. If you change that 7th around up or down a half step, if you raise it or lower it, it's going to change the function of the chord, and we'll get into what that function is and what those functions are, depending. It has to do with what chord it leads to next when you change that. So we have a D, F, A, C here. That's going to make a minor chord, a minor triad with a, what is the 7? So that is an A to an E, or A to a C. That is a minor third on top. So C, so A to C. Okay, we'll count it out. A to a C, that is a minor 7th chord. So we can look at it in terms of this too. So this is all the varieties of chords. Ah, yes. Okay. Just clarifying to myself. Ah, yes. And we have 2 different ways of writing this. So it gets kind of interesting here. Let's draw the variation of this. So let's say we were to let's say we were to separate the chord out, the structure of the chord out from the scale. So this let's go ahead and let's do this. We'll get rid of this always. Get rid of these extra notes here. So this is one of the things on those changes of function when you change the 7th. That's one of those parts I'm going to talk about. One of the spots where that happens. So I'll say here this is with. Okay. Let's do this within C major scale. And then say down here, this is no scale. So up here we have the chord in terms of a scale. Down here we have the chord just on its own, independent of a scale. So if I were to say to you, play me a 1 major 7, you'd be like, what? How? I need the key. I need to know what note to start it on, because I don't have enough information. It's just a 1 major 7. First of all, what is that 1 or I major 7? Like, that's, you would say 1 major 7. That's how you read out the Roman numeral. You'd say 1, play me a 1 major 7. What is your 1? You have to know that. This bottom notation tells you. So it's a C major 7. Okay, I'll play a C, and I'll follow the pattern for a major 7th chord down here. By the way, let's just take a quick look at this chart. So these are all the types of 7th chords that can exist. And I've drawn here a little crossbar, or the crossbar, I don't know what you would call it, kind of like thing, to show you that you have the bass triad that you're working with, and then you have an added 7th on top. So when it follows this pattern, when you end up with a major chord on the bottom, say root, major 3rd, minor 3rd, and with a minor 3rd on top, that nets you a dominant 7th chord. We're not going to worry about why it's dominant and what dominant does. This is the structure of the chord. This is how a dominant chord is made. Oh, hello there. We have a viewer. Hi there. How are you doing? So I was talking about chords and 7th chords. Let's continue doing that. So we have 5 different types of 7th chords that can exist. Chords with 4 notes in them. They're all based on existing 3-note chords, tonics, not tonics, excuse me, 3-note triads with an added 4th note, and depending on what the interval is from that, you get different qualities of chords. So the different ones that can exist are the dominant 7th. Not worrying about what dominant is yet. This is how you would form that quality of chord. In C, it would be the 1/7, or actually this is assuming these are all on C, right? And this is how you'd write them in both. No scale, without a scale, and then with a scale. So in this case, C major, scale. So next we have the major 7th chord. This is a major chord on the bottom, and then a major 3rd above. Hello, Nate. How you doing? So major chord on the bottom, root, major 3rd, minor 3rd, and then a major 3rd on top. You would write it like this. You would write the C and then a major next to that 7. Here, right, you would write just the 7 and a capital, or just, actually, never mind. Just the 7. Just the 7. And the bottom chord's going to be major for dominant. Moving on, the minor 7th. So we have the major 7th, we have the minor 7th. This is, I'm doing good, I am doing wonderfully. I've had 1 cup of coffee. I feel like I'm going to need 2, but hey, I'm feeling pretty good today. Anyways, we have the minor 7th. So 2 ways to write this out. Well, the intervals. What are the intervals? What is the structure of the chord? Oh, and Nate, let me just bring back up a concept that I brought up earlier, just to kind of make things more clear as I go on. So I've kind of defined. Here, let me find it. Yes. So structure versus function. So chords can have functions. They are able to do stuff. Mainly, their function is to lead to other chords, and the notes within them facilitate that, and it uses the notes within them and the relationships of those notes to the next chord tells the function of that chord, and we can get into the definitions of all that. Haven't done it yet. Sort of just kind of been touching on it. Then we have the structure, which is like the concrete, like what are the intervals, what makes up this chord, what are the major third, the minor third, and the major third, right? That's the structure. We can, or like what key it's in, what notes does this quality make up. That's all structure. That has nothing to do with why that chord's there and how that chord leads to other ones. That all has to do with function. So we're just trying to separate out these two concepts today and throughout the rest of this course, just to make, describe, because when you talk about chords, when we're talking about notes, there's a lot of terms that are recycled, that are used for multiple things. So I'm trying to sort of make very clear the context that I'm talking in. So the stuff written in red, that's our, well, except these notes. Okay. We're not coming up with a color scheme right now, but you get the idea. Structure versus function, and I'll make sure to constantly tell you what I'm referring to. Okay. So back to the qualities. Let me get a drink of water real quick, because I've been doing way too much talking and not a lot of hydrating. Oof. Gotta stay hydrated. You gotta do it. All right. So, haven't mentioned what these markings mean. So I had written this crossbar here to show you that, okay, this is the triad that the 7th chord is based on, right? But then this mark up here, this represents if you're working within a scale. So the context is the scale. Also, let me make sure my headphones are on. Okay. 1 second. All right. So what I was trying to say was this marking on the top here, working it within the context of this scale. So this says within the C major scale, does this stay the same? Does this note exist within the scale, or is it raised or lowered some amount from what it would be in the scale? So, for example, 1, 3, 5, 7. If we follow this pattern and we make a dominant 7th on 1, in fact, this would be more accurate if I made this a 5. So in fact, this is wrong. 1 sec. Let me figure out the best way to kind of put this. So if we were in 1, I might just change the chord around, actually, because I want to talk about dominant as leading in to something. So we're going to change the chord to a G, G7. And in C major, that would be a 5/7. So let's go. That's going to be G, B, D, F, and then the intervals are. Obviously, we have the intervals written down already for us. Okay, so these notes. So then we could put a little mark here. If I have a dash here, that means that if we build this chord as written here, the G7, all of these notes will be within the C major scale. So G, B, D, and F all exist within this scale. Okay? But in the case of, let's say we stayed in C major, and we made a major 7 on 1, and this would in fact also stay the same if we were to make a major 7 on 1, because then we would end up with C, E, G, B. So all those notes are in the scale. Instead of saying in the scale, I'm going to I'm going to use another word, and I'll define it up here. Diatonic. Diatonic. In key. Alright, so whenever I say diatonic, that's what I mean. I'll scroll up to it every once in a while. But now I can come back and I can say, okay, all the notes here are diatonic. They're all within the scale. So if they're diatonic, that means there's gonna be a dash here. This F is unchanged. This is fine. This is good. And if we're using a major 7th and we started on C, so a 1 major 7, C, E, G, B, that all checks out. It's all diatonic. Great. But what if we were to make a C minor 7? So a minor 7th, that is C, or a root, minor 3rd, major 3rd, minor 3rd. You can see here I have drawn an arrow. In fact, I need to draw another arrow. Okay. Let me draw them on the right side. You see here I've drawn an arrow. That means I have lowered the note from C major down a semitone. So this means down 1 ST, aka a semitone, aka 1 note. That's a semitone, or okay, I gotta hit 1 note. That's a semitone as well. Or right, so it's down 1 semitone. And that's the case because we have C, if we start on 1, C, E, flat, G. So major 3rd up from E flat is G, and then G, minor 3rd up from G is a B flat. So we have this. By the way, this is a very, very common chord. And personally, it's my favorite chord as well. I love this chord. So that's a minor 7th. Very nice sounding. Very useful in pop music. Very useful in electronic music. It's got a lot of emotion to it. And it's pretty easy to use to ignore leading rules and all the stuff we're about to get into, and just use minor 7ths for all the chords in this for all of the chords you're gonna have. It's just minor 7ths for everything. And in fact, that's what house music does. It'll just it'll come up with a little progression like C, G, A, F, but all of those chords will be minor. So like for example, so C, A, what should I do here? C, F, G. Let's do like a 1, 4, 5, 1. So maybe a traditional chord progression would sound like in C major for 1, 4, 5 would be like this. I'll make it so you can see the keyboard as well. So 4. Oh, you're not seeing all the notes. Some of them are cut off an octave. Okay. So then here's our 1. I'll do it in 7th chords, so I'll do a major 7. And then major 7 on 4. And then our dominant on 5. So if we're playing a diatonic 7th chords, all notes in the key. If we start on G, we build up a 7th chord. That's going to end up being our dominant seventh. And dominant has the function of wanting to lead back to C, and I'll explain. So G, B, D, F. Let's look at G. G is related to C by both a fourth down and a fifth up. And you might remember from intervals that both of those intervals are what we call perfect intervals. So we have I guess you could call it like a perfect resolution, a perfect motion from G to C. And it's in harmony, when we're talking about harmony, therefore, like, harmony meaning, like, this in relation to a bunch of other notes at the same time. This resolution, this G to C, so a resolution being dominant to tonic most of the time. In fact, like all the time, if we're talking about, like the function of dominant is to go to tonic. So, and it does so by having these resolutions for each of the notes. So G, the first note of this chord, goes to C by a fourth. Or it can go down to C by a fifth. And that is a very strong strong resolution, let's just say. Strong resolution. Let me go to here. Right, so now let's go to this text. So we're just looking at dominant for now. So the structure of a dominant chord is major chord with a minor seventh, and it's built on scale degree 5, so G. Yeah, you see here, G and C major. So we end up with a G, B, D, F. Awesome. And that's going to lead into a C, E, G. So C, let's do this. Actually, let's put it up here where they are. C, G. And you'll see the notes are very, very closely related, and we get lots and lots of resolutions all stacked together. So the one we just discussed was this resolution from G to C. In fact, I have this diagram already shown down here, but I'm going to draw it first, and I'll show it drawn out on the staff. So G to C is our fourth up resolution. And then we have our B to C. That is a minor second up. So minor second up. That is also, believe it or not, so we have the stronger resolutions at the perfect fourths and perfect fifths. But when we have a motion within a chord, that is, when we have this, we're looking at just the B. And this goes a second up to one of the notes in the next chord, so a second up to C. And you have the same thing going on with the D. Or sort of going on with the D. You have a D having a resolution down to the C. So that is a major second. Let me try to zoom in as much as I can, and maybe lower the thickness of all this stuff so you can actually see it. Minor second down to C. Let me give myself more space because I'm running out of room. So we have G, B, D, F, and then we have C, E, G. So the 5, 7 to the 1. This is the resolution that we're trying to break down. So we're trying to figure out why this resolves to 1. And it's because the notes within resolve to other notes within, and you have a lot of them going on. We have another viewer. Hello, 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 hello. Say hi in the chat. How are you doing? I'm doing good. How about you? Yes, good day. The weather is nice. It is actually nice. It is quite nice. Anyways, we're talking about chords and their functions and their structures. And the fact that chords can have functions and also have structures, and they're independent but also related concepts. Oh boy, no news. Can you not Can you not right now? I need to disable my notifications. Anyway, yeah, we don't want to hear from Reddit. No, thank you. No, especially not about that. All right, so we just talked about the fourth resolution up. So this resolves. Okay, can you not? Can you not? Maybe if I do this. Yeah, if I just disconnect myself from the interwebs, that should work. Okay. So we have, that is very unclear. Fourth resolution up. Or if the C were down an octave, it could be a fifth resolution down. And we had mentioned that in a C major scale, or in a major scale period, the fourth and the fifth are perfect. So therefore they are the strongest possible movements in harmony. Let's just spare ourselves the details. But fourths and fifths are good strong forces that pull us, or that if we use that motion, it has a strong pulling motion to the next chord. It wants to, the G wants to move up to C within the context of the other ones, right? Sparing ourselves words and such and explanations, it just feels right. Not only because it's a G to C, because G also exists within the one. Because we have not only a G movement, fourth or fifth resolution down to C, the note itself exists. So we have also a zeroth. I don't know if if you can even use this term, but you know what I mean. The note exists in both chords, so that further connects them together. And then all of the other notes, so you have this fourth or fifth down, you have it also resembled in the second, in the following chord, in the tonic. G and G are shared. Then you have just second motions everywhere else. So you have a B, C second, minor second, up to C. D is major second, down. And then D to E is a major second up. And then F to E is a minor second down. And then F to G is a minor second up. So all of these small but yet strong resolutions combined, this one, D to C, this one, D to E. So what I'll do is I'll play the resolution, all notes at the same time. Gbdf, or I'll just play the dominant, and then the tonic that it resolves to, that it naturally wants to move to. And then I'll play just the individual note resolving to another note. So firstly we have G to C, so oops. Can I bring both these up at the same time? So we have this going there. Also, the note is practically shared. If we were to make an inversion of C major, inversion of our tonic, we could see this more clearly. Like, let's say we were to resolve to G C E, so that's C E G in second inversion. If we were to then resolve to that from our dominant 5 chord, our 5/7, you see only 2 notes go down. Well, obviously this one goes up to C, this one goes down to C, this one goes down to E. So we have the two ones going down in the top, 2 notes going down, and then this note resolving up. So you have 2 notes, B and D, resolving to our C. So that further makes that resolution to the C strongest, because we have that resolving, and we actually have 3 technically, because if we count the 4th and the 5th resolution to C, we have this going to C, not this. I mean, this helps because it leads to this and this. F leads down to E and up to G, so it just further reinforces that motion, that strength and that resolution. So now this doesn't necessarily have to only be in C major. Again, the key is movable. You can move this to within any context in any key, and you could make a dominant with the pattern. So the pattern for dominant would be, right, the structure of a dominant chord. Okay, also let's take a look here. So this is kind of a graphical form of what I just described. So we have the G, B, and D leading to C. This going up a 4th. Going down a 5th, or let's see, down here we'll say 1. G stays the same, right? So we have that there too. So G goes up a 4th to C, B goes up a 4th to C. So this is the first note in the dominant scale, or dominant chord, 2nd note in the dominant chord, 3rd note in the dominant chord, 4th note in the dominant chord. G, I'm just going to draw the note names within them. G, B, D, D, F to E. See the resolution. So G, G, F. Awesome. 5. So this is just a 5 chord because it's we're omitting the 7. So 5 to 1. All of these notes technically lead to the C. And then to the E, we have the D and F leading to it. So D, the third note in the chord, leading to the 2nd note in the chord E, and the 4th note in the chord, the 7th, leading down to the 3rd of 1. Lots of numbers, but I hope it's kind of clear that when I'm making the distinction between scale degrees and just members of the chord. So yeah, again, things have multiple meanings. I trying to keep things less confusing. Anyway, G. We have things going to E. We have 2 notes leading to E. We have the F leading up to G, and the G remaining the same. Cool. So we now know what dominant means. Having lots of leading tones. And you can see them all here as well. So that dominant to tonic motion is something you're going to want to end up at when you're making a chord progression. Because a chord progression, now when we're using in context of this, we could say a chord progression is a series of chords that all have leading tones and resolving motions to the next chord in the progression. So then let's keep that in mind, and let's look at the subdominant. So we know what dominant means. Now that we can therefore define, hopefully we can therefore define the subdominant. It is just kind of it is similar to the dominant, but it is kind of reverse. It is a reverse of the dominant. It is like the dominant's evil twin, but not really. The subdominant in fact reinforces the dominant because it's got several motions up to the dominant, which then can lead to the tonic. But the subdominant is in fact the destination if the tonic were a dominant chord. Let me say that again. So if you were to take the C major chord, right, the triad that's built on C major, C, E, G, and you were to make that dominant by adding a minor third on top, that would therefore lead you to the 4 chord, the subdominant chord. That is the subdominant is the tonic resolution. Remember, the tonic can be let me also say this. because you have now made the 1 a dominant, that leads you somewhere, right? Because the dominant has to lead you somewhere. We talk, that is the function of the dominant. The structure of the dominant is just the up here, right? Major third, minor third, minor third. That gives you a dominant chord. Okay. But the dominant chord has a function built in. It leads somewhere. Therefore, we can figure out by knowing that this resolves to that, this resolves down to that. Let's draw out. Let me take this same diagram here and just copy it over. And we're going to figure out where the dominant on C major will lead us. What is the resolution of that? Well, we can follow the same kind of thing that we did with this here. Whoops, that's not what I wanted to do. Reso. Okay, so C, this is C7. So that is a C dominant 7th chord. And that's going to lead us somewhere. So if it's dominant, it has this arrow attached on there. So, right, leads us to. And we're going to figure this out. So what does it lead us to? Well, I may have spoiled it already, but we're going to get there. We're going to get there piece by piece. Starting with erasing all this old stuff. Excuse me. Get rid of all that. A little tedious, I know. But we're doing this in live time, real time. This is what it's all about. Okay, oops. We can keep these numerals because we're still going to use them. Because, well, actually, no. We're still going to be working within C major. All right, so within C major, these chords are going to therefore change. So this is now the 1. And then this is the 4. This is the 4. This is the 1, 7. And this is the 1, 7 as well. That's the 4. 1, 7. Okay. And we'll show how all the notes in 1, 7 will lead to 4. Okay. So, let me get these down so I can draw the C in the bottom. So the C's right here. Boop. And C, E. Whoa there. That's kind of a weird gap. I need to space these notes out a little bit more just so it makes more sense. Maybe down there. And I will move the ledger line with it. So we have C, G. By the way, the last note of the C7 is a, so we have our root, our major third, our minor third, and then, well, what goes on top of that? Minor third. So that leads us up to our B flat. So we have here C, E, G, B flat. All right, and that will go to F, A, C. I didn't write 7 here. I made this dotted because I want to show that different, similarly to this, I want to show the separate notes leading to each. So I'll draw out 3 examples of this. In fact, I will take out the 7 here too. And we will say, okay, which of these notes lead to this? Which of these notes lead to that? Which of these notes lead to that? Also, what are these notes? It's F, A, C. Leads us to F major. So we've already answered the question up here. We're going to talk about how it does. We're just going to follow intervals. So C, and then E, and then technically G also. We have this fourth up to F, so C to F is a fourth up or a fifth down. E to F is a minor second up, because remember that E. Also, I'm going to go ahead and play the whole resolution. That's our C dominant seventh based on, right, C. Also, remember the whole definition diatonic? This is not diatonic. This chord is actually not diatonic. I mean, why would you think that is? Well, I'll tell you, because I'd rather not wait 30 seconds for an answer, because that's the latency of the stream, and that's kind of annoying. It is because this B flat exists. The scale, C major, has a B in it. Therefore, this chord is not diatonic. But that's okay. That's okay. We don't necessarily have to be diatonic. We could waver from the key in scenarios like this to lead us to other chords within the key. We could alter a chord to make it dominant to lead us to another chord that may eventually lead us to the 5, which is the dominant of the tonic, because you want your chord progression, right, to cycle around. You want it to cycle around back to the tonic, and you want it to lead you there. So if you want other chords in your progression to lead to like other chords of progression, like step through it, making one of the chords a dominant is a good way to do that. So I will continue going through the pattern here. So we have our 1 7 to 4. In fact, I will go up to it. So we have our fourth resolution. Oops. We have our second up resolution. We have minor second up, that is. And then we have our G, so in C, E, G, with the B flat added. This leads a major second down to F, which is, if we're still in C major, this is F major is, again, we're talking about the subdominant. F is the subdominant, so it's going to lead us to the subdominant. But what we're essentially doing is that dominant to tonic motion. That is a dominant to tonic motion. So we could say that we are essentially making that F, that subdominant, the tonic for a second. So that sort of makes it that defines the tonic as a function, right? So we have, again, the concept of structure and function. The subdominant, if the F is considered subdominant, it may or may not have been like, you may or may not have had a dominant 1 that leads you into the subdominant, that leads you into 4. But like, here, let me think of another way to. Right here, so I have down here, I have beneath function, so leads the tonic with resolutions. strong resolutions can precede the dominant. So, right, I've written here, said the subdominant can either lead you to the dominant by a motion upwards. So let's say we're on F. We have just gotten there, and then maybe we set up this little chord progression like. So we have 1, and then we have 1 7, and then we have F. So we have ended up on F. So now we're on the subdominant. And that motion there. That just leads you up. So that upward motion into the dominant is the purpose of the subdominant. So you can, the structure of the subdominant is saying, okay, if you're on the 4 and you build up a triad, it can be a triad or a 7th chord, doesn't matter. If you build up that triad on the 4th scale degree, you will end up with a subdominant chord. Right? But you could say that, no, I contradict myself, because subdominant is a function, right? Subdominant is supposed to, if we're calling a chord subdominant, yeah, let me double back on this and kind of start fresh with this. So subdominant is a function. If you are calling a chord subdominant, then that means the chord leads to a dominant next. So otherwise, you should just call it a 4 chord. You should just call it an F major or an F major 7, whatever you're using. F major 7 or F7 if it were a dominant chord. F dominant 7. But again, calling it dominant means it's going to lead somewhere else, because then you have that function attached to it. So if you're to get to a subdominant, one of the ways to get to a subdominant, you don't necessarily have to resolve to it, but it is a strong way to do so. So if you're thinking of what would qualify a good chord progression, right? It's using those chords that have the leading tones in them, and that make these motions, and that follow these functions. So then, all right. So far, we have the dominant that leads to the tonic being our home key, our home chord, and from the tonic, the next chord in our progression can be anywhere. So the tonic can go to any chord, but then once you go somewhere, you have left home, and you have to find a way back home. So that way back home is through the resolutions, through the motions that lead you to a dominant chord that naturally leads you back to 1. Now, you don't have to, but in terms of like brawl, just music theory, the 5 to the 1 is the strongest possible resolution, the strongest possible motion back to our home key, back to the start of our next chord progression. But you can go from 4 to 1. You can go from the subdominant to 1, but that won't be as powerful of a resolution. But there are a lot of very popular songs that use a 4 to 1, like perhaps songs that go 1 minor 6 major 5 and then major 4. In that case, so a song that goes like this. So this, I'll do it inverted. In that case, because the 5, we're working still in C major, but the 5 moved to a 4. It didn't move to a 1. That means that the 4, in this case, is not a subdominant yet, but it's not the dominant either. It just resolves to 1 from the subdominant, which is, it's fine. It works, but it doesn't necessarily work as strong, but maybe strength is not something you want. See, like, again, I'm giving you hard, fast rules, but they are not, but they aren't that way. They aren't hard. They're just guidelines. They're guidelines. They're what past composers and musicians have kind of just agreed on and started to write in because they wanted their works to be more powerful, because they wanted their music to be more emotional. They came up with these rules and these guidelines to make music sound better, to make it actually lead you somewhere, to make it sound like your music has purpose and direction. There's these little musical nuances and these little things you can do, like using resolutions and using these small and large steps to lead you to the next chord. This makes your music more interesting and makes it worth listening to. So, enough with my spiel. Enough with that. So we have the idea of tonic. We have the idea of dominant. We have the idea of subdominant. So that I'm not just overloading you with a truckload of new words and info and stuff. That's all the functions we're going to talk about today. So we have a major, right? Blah, blah, blah. I'll leave it on this for a little bit. We got the different types of, I haven't gone through all the different types of seventh chords because we have not yet encountered them all. We talked about resolutions and all that before we've even gotten to all of our four chords we can have, all of our 4-note chords we can have, all of our seventh chords we can have. That is if we were doing diatonic seventh chords, all in the key. So let's continue going up and see what we end up with in a major scale. In this case, a C major scale. So we have our 1 major 7. Then we have our D minor 7. Minor chord plus a minor 7th. Plus a minor 3rd, that is. The interval is a minor 3rd, but it makes a minor 7 when added on top of a minor chord. And then the 3 minor 7, based on a 3, based on the 3 chord, the triad on 3, which ends up being minor. And then we have a minor 3rd on top, makes a 3 minor 7. So that is this chord right here. And then we have the subdominant chord, the 4 chord, which ends up being major in a major scale. If we add the diatonic 7th, aka the 7th above this chord, that would be in C major, therefore an E, we end up with a major 7, so a 4 major 7. So we have a 1 major 7, and then a 4 major 7. And now that we have figured this out, you have the foundation of all lo-fi songs ever. You have major chords going from 1 to 4, or you have major 7th chords going from 1 to 4, or you have minor 7th chords going from 1 to 4. You can imagine a lo-fi beat behind that. But you know, you can start to recognize these things. Like, one of these days we're going to talk about all of this when you use a minor scale, because it's a lot more common that you'll find chords in minor, or when the diatonic of a chord, or when the diatonic is minor. I don't even know if you could say it like that. Also, I missed a ledger line. That's supposed to be an A. Yeah, we'll see what minor seventh chords we end up with, or what seventh chords we end up with when we build triads. We build seventh chords with the C minor scale. In fact, we could probably even try that today. That's not a hard exercise at all, and we might end up encountering some of these other two types of seventh chords. In fact, I think we will end up running into one here. Yes, we're going to end up running into a half diminished. So let me just define what that is first. So we have the minor seventh with these patterns, with this structure, and then we have the diminished seventh, which is just fully diminished seventh. You have root, minor third, minor third, minor third. So stacks of minor thirds. And the arrows to say, like, okay, we're in C major, right? This is lowered down to an E flat, so that's lowered down one. That's lowered down, that was a G, and now it's a G flat, so that's lowered down another one. So another half step. I'll just draw out the notes themselves. So C, E, G, B. So to get a diminished seventh, for the note names for a diminished seventh chord would be C, E flat, G flat, and last one, which is kind of a tricky one, ends up being B double flat. Double flat? What the heck is a double flat? Well, remember that I said that notes, when you are letter names, note names, when you're laying out a scale, or when you're laying out a scale or a chord based on a pattern, like one of these formulas, like minor third, minor third, minor third, we have to again represent all of the letter names, and we have to represent them as like correctly as they are. So if these are thirds stacked on top of each other, we have to make sure that the letter names are also spaced out in thirds. So C, E, G, B. We can't have C, E, G, A, because that would not be separated out by thirds. That would not be separated out. That would be like, it would be like getting up to a sixth instead of a seventh. Ah, yeah, see, here's where the catch is. In order to call it a diminished seventh chord, you have to have the note name for the seventh, and the seventh is B. So you can't have an A, because that would be something else entirely. It would no longer be you wouldn't call it diminished, because it's not made up of thirds. And you definitely couldn't call it seventh, because it doesn't have the seven anymore. So that's why we have this double flat here, because in fact it is an A, but it is because it is lowered down from B twice. So this is, let's start from our reference of, so diatonically, if we were to play starting on C, we end up with a major seventh, right? C, E, G, major, plus G, B, major 7. But if we wanted a diminished seventh, we start out with a diminished chord. So C, E goes down to E flat, and then G goes down to G flat. So G to down to G flat. So that's our diminished triad. And then our seventh on top of that. So we end up with B, and then we have to go down, down, and then down again to end up with our B double flat. Remember, it's a B double flat. It's a B double flat, not an A. I swear, it's not an A. Even though you really want it to be an A, but it is not an A. So let's take a look. So you end up with this. And in order to follow the pattern of stacked minor thirds and still represent all of these notes, we lower the E down to E flat, lower the G down to G flat, lower the B down to a B flat, B double flat. And they end up with a B flat, fully diminished seventh. Cool. Let's talk about the half diminished seventh. So if you don't like double flats. Which I particularly don't like double flats either, because I just want to use the name that's on the keyboard. But, you know, when you're trying to come up with chords, and you're trying to name chords, like, officially, you gotta use the names. You gotta use the conventions. Voice crack. The half diminished seventh is a normal diminished triad. So root, minor third, and oops, I forgot to draw the symbol for it. The symbol goes like, you have a 1 diminished, and then put a slash through it. It's only half diminished. You cut it in half. Can't really think of a better way to explain that one, but you know, that's just what the symbol looks like. So you have a circle that represents your diminished, and you cut that in half, add a 7 afterward. Half diminished seventh. So you have a major third up instead of a minor third up. And that ends up sounding like, whoops, that ends up sounding like this. In fact, the half diminished seventh also has its own resolution point. It's a dominant for something, believe it or not. Or it might not be a dominant. It's a partial dominant, but it has a direction that it wants to go. Like, I'm not going to get too much into this because then it would be a whole other drawing and a whole other explanation. But like, essentially, you have this G, this. Same with this chord. This chord also wants to go somewhere. It wants to go here, I think. That is a place it can go. So because this goes down to that, and then this goes down to that, and then A goes down to G, and then F sharp goes up to G. So I'm not necessarily going to make an assignment out of like finding the resolution of a certain chord. That is, it's more to it than just like giving you a couple examples. There's a lot. There's a little bit more theory behind it, and if you're so interested to perhaps do a little bit of research on your own and kind of get familiar, I can direct you in the right way. So if you want to find out more about, first of all, musictheory.net is a great resource for lots of really like crucial music theory topics. Gives you this little simple kind of layout. It's a little simple lesson that you can click through as fast as you want. You can even practice it. It's got a keyboard built in. I'll show you a little bit around. Why not? Musictheory.net. Musictheory.net answers. I mean, there is that too, but I just want to go to lessons. And here is a whole category of what we have been discussing. Chords, introduction, triad, inversion. So the first and second inversion. Seventh chords, what we just talked about today. So you have triads, you add a fourth note, you get seventh chords. More seventh chords, inverting seventh chords. That's something we haven't talked about and we're going to get to very next. And no, I am not following along this exactly with what I'm teaching, because you see here, diatonic triads are right below this. And I was already talking about diatonic. But yeah, it goes into much more detail and talks about all of like stuff with rhythm, basic things about sheet music. I'm not touching too much on sheet music because we are using Soundtrap, so I'm trying to kind of keep it within piano roll. And what we will do, because we are running out of time for today, is next week I will have some diminished sevenths, some seventh chords resolving. I'll have that Midi in Soundtrap, and then you can hear. They'll have a recording, a couple tracks laid out with some basic chord progressions in them. I had already started on this, but again, these are just using triads. So I've got like a 1 4 5 4, a what is this one? Doesn't have a name. 1 5 6 4. So different common pop progressions, and we can enhance them later on by adding sevenths to them, and then with the sevenths we can have more leading tones and have more direction to our chord progression. Cool? Cool. So, let's see what to talk about next. Oh, let's try. So we had this resolution here. Okay. Also, this doesn't make sense anymore. So this is the C7 leading into F major. You could get the idea. You just follow the same pattern that this follows. So C E G goes to the F somehow, or yeah, C E G. This one goes down, major second, and we could continue this, but it follows the same dominant pattern as a G to C, just with different numbers or different numerals. So a 1 instead of a 5. It's a 1, but it's dominant to major tonic. A temporary, like this is, I guess you could say like a, so this is subdominant, but remember how I said that subdominant means that it has to lead to the dominant. Here it doesn't do that. So in fact, this is not, when we're talking about it in just this case, this is not the subdominant, but this is actually the tonic, because this is the dominant, right? But I'm going to put quotes around it because we're still in C major. So it's not technically the tonic, but for this very moment, for this one slice of time, for this one little measure, from here to here, right here, the F, A, C, that is your tonic now. You have essentially, use this fancy word, tonicized. You have, by using a dominant leading into that F, you have tonicized the F, the F chord. You have made it a temporary home. You have found shelter in the F chord, but it's only a hotel, right? You need to move out the next day. So you need to stay around, hover around F, A, C, hover around the 4 chord as long as you want, but you can't hover there for too long because you got to eventually come back home. You got to eventually pack your bags and then move on to, and then make, so this is just like the subdominant. Eventually you got to move on to some other chord that might get you away or lead you to the dominant, or perhaps not. Maybe you'll take a side route. Maybe you'll take a side road back to home. Like you'll take the 4 chord back to home. You could always just go right back from the 4. It could be a short trip, right? You could just go from the 4 chord back to the 1 chord, because that works. I told you already that works. You can go 1 4 1 4 1 4 1. Now that might make for a pretty boring song, but it's going. But in terms of like forces, like pushing and pulling, like leading and like the intervals, it'll work out. It'll work out in a way. But just won't work out as strongly if you use a 5 to 1, or maybe a 1 4 5 to 1, or a 1 6 to 5 to 1. And I'm starting at like the ends here, essentially. So we're figuring out chord progressions from the outside in. So we're starting at the ends, the end and the beginning, and the end. So the beginning would be the tonic, and the end would be the dominant, or some other chord that functions as a chord that leads you back into the tonic. A dominant is a good example of something that leads you back into the tonic. A 7 chord, a chord based on the 7th scale degree, the diminished chord. In fact, I haven't gotten there yet. Let me play through these real quick. So we have the 4 major 7, then the dominant 7, and then we have a 6, a minor 6. So that forms another minor 7. So this is one of those like stops that you could go along. So you could do maybe you could start at C, then go down, go from 1 to 6. That's possible because remember from 1 you can go to any chord you want, and then from maybe the 6 you could go to 3. Now that you're on 3, it might be convenient for you to go up to F, or so from you're on 3, you could go up to F. You go from E to G, but that's not because of the function that we haven't talked about the function of the 3 chord yet. That isn't as strong of a motion as it is if you were to go from 3 to 4, or if you were to go from, like, if you were to go from 3 to 4, it would be better than if you were to go directly from 3 to 5, because you're skipping over the subdominant to dominant motion, right? Because that is the strongest way you can lead into the dominant, is with the subdominant. Another way to lead into it is from the 6th chord above, which has another name to it, the submediant. And the mediant and submediant, we skipped over those definitions for today. We'll get back to them on another day because they're a little bit more involved. So again, ends, beginning and end, dominant to tonic. And you have some mishmash in the middle, some journey that you take to get to those destinations. And again, those are hard, fast rules. You don't have to take the road. You can take the, you can go on foot. You can go down the hiking trail. You can go down any way you want. It might not just be as satisfying, if you know what I mean. That might be a pretty good analogy. Because essentially that's what you're doing. You're like, in your chord progression, you're kind of traveling through different chords or different colors. Chords, you can think of chords as colors, right? And you can think of, right, and think of it as the palette, as the scene, at which you are putting your melody on top of this scene, or you're putting or maybe this would be for like vocals. The rap could be a melody. Like the melody is then put on top of this harmony, and plus, I mean, in rap, like, you might have 1 or 2 chords at the most. Your chord progression is very, very simple because you don't really want to leave the home. You have the home established, and you could maybe move away from it in some spots to emphasize something that the rapper's saying, or maybe you just have this like simple pattern that's like the flow, right? It's a different way of thinking in different genres. A lot of this theory, a lot of these names and numbers come from classical. And it comes to that's just because I studied classical theory, just as long as I've been alive. That's the route I went down. I could have gone down several routes, and they think of the chords in different ways and they name them in different ways, but it all comes back down to the same concepts, the same ideas of chords leading to one another and ending up back at a home, ending up back at a destination, and taking some journey in between. And if we know the specifics of each chord and how it can lead to the next one, we can plot better routes. But of course, we can follow a map, and we can pick some common chord progressions that people already know work. But it's better to know why they work in the first place, so you could be creative and come up with your own chord progressions and maybe break away from some of those common tropes and make your own sound and make your own harmonies. But on that second note, I always contradict myself. You can't really, I'm pretty sure if you pick a harmony, that harmony's already been done somewhere else in the world somewhere. So if you think you aren't original, then don't worry about it. There are opportunities to be original way beyond. In fact, I would recommend trying to be. You can come up with your own chord progressions here. You can be original in this sense, but you can't be. It's only to a degree. It's only to a certain extent. Like, you only have 12 notes to work with, for Christ's sake. You only have 12, and you only have, like, if you're in a key, you only have 7 chords to choose. Again, that's a hard, fast rule. You can always shift some of the chords to be dominant to lead to others. You can lower the 7th, you can raise the 7th, you can make it a minor 7th if you want. You can go back to just the structure of a chord and you can say, hey, here on the 3 I want a major. Why not? Make it a major. It might help you lead into the, like, let's say I choose that same chord progression I did earlier. From a 6, from a 1. Let's say I wanted yeah, let's say I wanted the 3 to better lead into the 4. So I could then make the 3 major. So let's say so instead of I made it this. And that works better because we now have more leading tones built in. I'm going to go to the keyboards and just play this again. And here's what I changed it to. By doing that, we have made... So let's look at the individual notes, right? We have made this. This remains the same, that E to F, but now instead of a G, we lose this G to F, but then we have this A flat leading up to A. See, now I'm not sure. Now I'm not sure if it's going to work exactly. It comes down to experimentation. So, what if I make this 6 major? It could work, but by making the 6 major, and if I added a 7th. Now has a destination, a natural destination to the D. It wants to go from here to this. And then I could use that 2 as a secondary. I can make the 2 also dominant, and that would lead me to the F. No, that would lead me to a B flat. Never mind. Lead me to a G minor, but then I could make that it leads you to G. Then well, yeah, there you go. 2 leads you to a G. So you end up with this. Then that. So again, C major. So if it was just diatonic, it would be like this. Minor, and then 2 minor, and then G dominant 7. So then with the changes, we have made them all dominants, all leading into each other, except for the first one, except for the tonic, of course. And then so the A becomes major. I'm going to add a 7th. So now we have a dominant 7th on A. That leads us down to, or up to, a D. That is the new tonic for this slice of time. So now the tonic is D. That was the 2 in our chord, right? So now this has been made tonic. But then to lead us better into the 5, let's make the 2 a dominant as well. So we could do this, and then make it go up to here. And I can add a 7th. And that will lead me up to, so 4th up on the lower note. Whoops. Leads me up to a G, which is already my dominant. So then we end up with this. Oops, that's got to be a... I could even add like the minor for the second, and then it could go to a dominant. So I'll have 2, and then make sure I have that 7th in there, and then our G. Yeah, cool. I believe tomorrow, I mean Monday. Monday we will start with the 4 chords. So the 4 note chords in C minor, or in any other minor. We'll do minor. We'll see. We're going to end up with diminished chords in places, diminished 7th chords in places. In fact, I don't know if we're going to end up with... No. I don't believe we're going to end up with a fully diminished. Let me figure this out real quick. So C, E flat, G, B flat, D, F, A flat, C. A flat to C, yeah, it's going to end up being half diminished. Yeah, but we'll see that when we come back. And we'll actually try to, like, put a basic chord progression down. We'll choose something from the minor scale, and we'll start putting it into Soundtrap. And also between here and this time and next time, I'll have all of this in Soundtrap, and I'll have a couple basic examples of stuff with of dominant progressions, and I'll just add that to the this by the way, this chord progression templates assignment. It's not an assignment. It's just I just made it an assignment so that it's available to all of you. And as I add more progressions in, you can sort of kind of take a little bit, maybe delete all the others, and then use it as a starting point for your song. You could just look here, and I'll try to be as informative as possible, add little notes in here and there, and say, okay, you got this chord progression. At this point, you can use... I wonder if there's a way to add little flags with notes. Anyway, I'll figure it out. And we'll have some chord progressions to choose from, and I'll go through and of course explain why it works in context of things we've been discussing today. So cool. What did we do? We have the concept of tonic, dominant, subdominant, functions of chords, structures of chords, the difference between those. The resolutions, why chords move to, or how chords move to the next one, and to move to each other in logical fashion. How do chords move to the next one? Like, you can always just here's the catch with that. Like, you can always just put another chord next to another chord, willy nilly, it's freely. But there are certain rules to what makes one chord after the other sound purposeful, sound like it's supposed to come next to your ear. Your ear might not know it. Your ear will know when something is right. You'll be able to tell, even if you can't describe it. Terms, words, definitions. You can tell when the next chord works or the next chord doesn't work, and you'll feel it. You'll feel it. Trust me. Especially if you... I don't think you'll end up doing this at all, but obviously, I mean, I'm sure you do. Music, try to listen for the chords, and if you're so inclined, perhaps even you can look them up. You can I don't know if... What is the app called? That's Shazam. I don't know if Shazam gives you chords. It gives you lyrics, but I'm not sure if it gives you chords. But you can always just Google a song, and it'll tell you its chord progression. And most likely, there will be a 5/7, or there'll be obviously will be a 1, and then there'll be likely a 5 somewhere. And it really depends on genre. But yeah, look for these things. Start trying to listen for chords and listen for progressions. And if you have a song that you would like me to kind of like figure out why it works, just tell me next week, and we can like break a song down. We can like do song breakdowns, obviously as long as it's PG, but we can do like that. We can look at a song and listen to it, because I can hear the chords in the song. Yeah. And I can try to figure out why it works. Because I'm not perfect. None of us are perfect. I can try. Alright, since it's 1:17, we are going to wrap up here. And I hope it has been informative, fun, and useful to you. Cool. Alright. Hopefully this is already set. Yes, it is. So, coming on next week at Monday. Oh, by the way, I said I would have a guest today, and call them in the morning. Say like, hey, can you pop into the show today, and maybe we can talk about this topic together. And he's like, yeah, sure, I'll stay up and be around and participate. And then an hour before the show, he went to sleep. Yeah, he went to sleep. I get I don't know, man. Dustin, this guy. Eventually we'll get him on. Eventually we'll catch him when he is awake. Or maybe I'll try to get someone different. Yeah. All right. Coming on Monday. Hopefully we'll have someone else by then, and it will be cool, like I said last time. All right. See ya later, Nate. And see